Imagine waking up to a phone call, middle of the night. It's a loved one, miles away. Their voice sounds okay, steady enough. But their car is stuck. They're fine. They just need a ride. You tell them you're coming, hang tight, everything will be okay. But then the line goes silent and they're just gone. And when you finally call for help, panicked, you hear something chilling back. It's their right to be missing. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a case that really taps into one of the deepest fears a family can have: the sudden, unexplained disappearance of someone you love. This isn't just a story about a son who vanished into thin air. It's really about a parent's incredible, unwavering fight for answers, a search that went on for years, and how this awful tragedy ended up sparking a movement for change across the country. So our mission today is to really unpack the details we've gathered about Brandon's disappearance and the law it inspired. We'll trace the investigation, look at the frustrating dead ends, and understand how this family's unimaginable pain actually forged a lasting legal legacy, Brandon's Law.
Exactly. And as we go through this really complex and honestly emotionally charged story, we'll look not just at what happened, the sequence of events, but why. Why did Brandon's disappearance hit such a nerve? And what does it tell us about the broader implications for how we, as a society, see and respond to missing persons cases? This deep dive will really bring out the kind of critical thinking you need when you're faced with ambiguous information, and how vital systemic changes for public safety and justice, can actually grow out of these deeply personal struggles. It's really a testament to how one family's sheer determination can shift national policy. It's quite something.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The story really starts very early in the morning, Wednesday, May 14th, 2008. Brandon Swanson, he was 19 at the time, a student. He'd just finished his final college classes for the semester at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. He was driving home to Marshall, Minnesota from a celebration he'd been to over in Canby. It was around 2:30 a.m. when he found himself in a situation a lot of young drivers face, right? His car, a green 96 Lumina, had gone off a gravel road and got stuck in a ditch. So he did what you'd probably do. He made a phone call. Not 911, but to the people he knew would drop everything. His parents, Brian and Annette Swanson. Brandon told them, look, the car's hung up, but crucially, he said he was fine. Just stuck, needed a ride. His dad, Brian, later talked about that call with this sort of chilling clarity. He specifically recalled that even though Brandon had had some drinks earlier, it was a party, right? He didn't sound disoriented or confused at all during their conversation. Brian remembered Brandon describing what he saw around him, saying he could clearly see fences and could hear the sound of water nearby. Based on Brandon's directions, they thought he was in a ditch on a rural road just outside Lynn, Minnesota, which wasn't far from their home. So trusting Brandon's directions and, that deep parental instinct, Brian and Annette didn't hesitate. They headed out to the dark into this unfamiliar rural area to find him. Driving around, scanning ditches, calling his name, nothing.
Oh, absolute gut-wrenching for any parent, right? That immediate just call to action, that primal need to protect your child just kicks in. And what's really significant here, like you said, is Brian's consistent memory that Brandon sounded coherent, totally lucid. This detail is so critical because it immediately pushes back against any later theories that might suggest, severe impairment led him to get more lost or act recklessly. It paints this picture of a young man, he's in a tough spot, but he's still thinking rationally, still communicating. This coherence fundamentally challenges any assumptions later made about his state of mind or his ability to figure out where he was. It means Brandon understood his situation. He was actively trying to get help, which makes his vanishing right after that all the more baffling and disturbing. It's not just, some kid wandering off confused. It's this sudden total silence from someone who was actively trying to get safe.
Right. That coherence is what makes this so immediately strange. It wasn't someone lost in a fog. It was someone asking for help. Makes the silence afterward deeply unsettling. So Brian and Annette, they searched for hours in the dark, calling Brandon over and over, just hoping for another word, any clue. By 6:30 a.m., dawn's breaking over these quiet fields, still no sign of Brandon. Their worry is escalating into just sheer terror. So they do what any parent would do. They drive to the Lynn Police Department to report him missing. And this is where the story takes a really shocking turn. A turn that wouldn't just change the Swanson family's life, but eventually the lives of countless others. Annette Swanson would later talk about that moment with such clarity, describing it as the very thing that ignited her fight for change. She vividly remembers the pivotal and frankly shocking initial response from the Lynn police. An officer she recalled actually said it was Brandon's right to be missing and suggested, it was hardly unusual for young men that age to stay out all night, especially after finishing college classes. I mean, can you even imagine feeling that raw terror, that desperation, and then being met with, bureaucratic indifference?
That contrast is just so stark. because it highlights a really critical systemic problem that existed then, and honestly, to some degree still lingers, in how law enforcement often handled missing adult cases back then. You have Annette's immediate, profound alarm based on her gut feeling, based on the details of that last call completely dismissed by this official response that felt almost procedural, detached. To really get the context here, you have to understand the historical view and the legal framework around missing people. For decades, police rules often made a sharp distinction between missing kids and missing adults. If a child vanished, especially a young one, the assumption was often abduction, immediate danger. That triggered a full-scale response, like an Amber Alert, right away. But for adults, especially young adults, the initial assumption was often that they'd chosen to leave, maybe avoiding responsibilities, starting fresh, or just, delayed coming home. There was this legal idea floating around about an adult's right to privacy, which some people interpreted as extending to a right to be missing if there wasn't clear immediate evidence of foul play or them being incapacitated.
Wow, so even with a stranded car, a sudden silence after a distress call.
Exactly. Even with all those highly unusual circumstances, the car, the silence, the coherent call asking for help, the parents' absolute conviction of danger, the police were, it seems, operating under a protocol, one that prioritized this theoretical right to be missing over the very real immediate concern for danger. And the psychological impact of hearing that statement when you're already grappling with fear and uncertainty, it's huge. It makes you feel isolated, it invalidates your urgent need for action, and crucially, it delays the search during the most vital hours. It really raises a critical question about the assumptions baked into that initial police view, doesn't it? Was it just lack of resources, a rigid reading of privacy laws, or maybe just underestimating the dangers of being stranded alone in a vast rural area? It definitely points to a massive systemic gap in how those crucial first hours of a missing adult case were handled back then.
And those first few hours are so often make or break, right? When leads are the freshest. So despite that initial, let's call it dismissiveness, the Lynn police did start a preliminary search later that morning, but they found absolutely nothing, no trace of Brandon in or near the town. This immediate dead end led them to ask for help from the Lyon County Sheriff Joel Dahl's office. So that's the first big shift, moving beyond just the local police. And to try and focus their efforts, the sheriff's office did something really important. They got Brandon's cell phone records. These records showed something staggering. Brandon hadn't been calling from near Lind at all. He was calling from somewhere near Taunton, which is along State Highway 68, the main road northwest of Marshall. And here's the kicker. Taunton is roughly 25 miles, that's about 40 kilometers northwest of Lind, where his parents had been searching and where Brandon thought he was. This just instantly blew the search area wide open. It showed Brandon was way further away than anyone realized, adding this chilling new layer to the whole mystery.
Yeah, that's a classic example, isn't it? How even early tech data back in 2008 could be a total game changer, turning what would have been an impossibly vast search into something more targeting. And just for context on the tech back then, unlike today's pinpoint GPS, in 2008, cell phone pings were more about triangulation, basically figuring out a rough area based on signal strength to nearby towers. So not super precise, but narrowing down Brandon's location from, anywhere that huge rural area to within a few miles of Taunton. That was like finding a needle in a haystack with a magnet, relatively speaking. It let investigators immediately pivot where they were looking. But like you said, this discovery also immediately created a huge challenge, that 25-mile distance across rural land.
Yeah.
Right away, it screams multi-jurisdictional nightmare. Because it's not just about drawing lines on a map, it means dealing with different police departments, different sheriff's offices. Each one has its own command structure, its own budget, its own ways of doing things.
Right, different radio frequencies, maybe different rules.
Exactly. Imagine trying to coordinate a search where one county's deputies use one radio system, another has different rules about crossing county lines, maybe a third has its own local emergencies happening. Information gets lost easily, resources might get duplicated, or crucial leads don't get shared fast enough. It creates this systemic friction that can cost precious hours in a missing person's case, especially when time is absolutely critical.
And those complexities absolutely became a factor, making an already awful situation even harder. So searching the Taunton area now, guided by that cell phone data, Lyon County deputies soon found Brandon's abandoned Lumina. It was in a ditch off a gravel road right along the Lincoln County line, about a mile north of Highway 68. So this discovery, putting the car in a new county, automatically brought the Lincoln County Sheriff, Jack Vizecki, into the investigation too. Sheriff Vizecki described the car's condition. It was hung up on the top of an incline, right at the edge of the road, facing south. Not seriously damaged, no big crash, but just enough so the wheels weren't touching the ground on one side. It was stuck. Importantly, nothing else seemed wrong with the car itself. No signs of a struggle, no forced entry, nothing like that. But here's the really crucial and incredibly frustrating detail that would just plague the search from then on. Because of the thick grass and loose gravel right around the car, there were no tracks, no footprints, no tire marks leading away. It meant there was absolutely no way to tell which direction Brandon might have started walking after getting out. The car was just a silent witness, offering zero clues about where he went next.
Yeah, if you step back and look at the car's state, it does offer some immediate answers, but like you said, it raises even bigger questions. On one hand, the lack of serious damage, nothing obviously wrong with the car itself, suggests Brandon wasn't in a major violent crash. And it doesn't immediately point to foul play right there at the vehicle. That can be, a small relief for investigators ruling out certain scenarios. But that frustrating lack of tracks, that's a huge blow. In rural searches, ground tracks, even faint ones, can be vital. They can tell you direction of travel, pace, maybe even something about their state. Were they stumbling, walking purposefully? Without tracks, investigators are basically blind right from Brandon's last known physical spot. They can't orient their ground searches effectively from the car. It's like trying to follow footsteps on a beach after the tides wash them away. That immediate, crucial evidence is just gone. It instantly hampered the traditional ground search efforts and forced them to rely on other methods, often less direct and, often less conclusive.
It's amazing how one missing detail, or the lack of one, can just throw everything off course. So the investigation, already complicated by the shifting locations, kept expanding geographically. By May 15th, they determined Brandon's cell call came from within about a 5-mile radius, that's 8 kilometers of a cell tower near Minneota, another town along Highway 68 just a bit further north. This new, wider search circle now pushed into Yellow Medicine County to the north, so their authorities got involved too. Now we've got 3 counties, Lyon, Lincoln, and Yellow Medicine, all tangled up in this increasingly complex and frankly kind of uncoordinated search. Sheriff Dahl from Lyon County, he offered a theory, a plausible one maybe, to explain why Brandon might have walked so far and gotten misdirected. He pointed out that from where the car was found, you could see this prominent red light on top of a grain elevator in Taunton. He thought maybe, just maybe, that red light shining in the dark made Brandon think Lynn was walkable distance away, that he was walking towards something familiar, and that caused him to walk much further than he should have, maybe confused by the dark and being a bit banged up. Search methods got more advanced, more desperate. Ground searches, sure, but also an aerial flyover. They brought in search dogs from the Twin Cities. And then a specialized, really highly respected team of bloodhounds came in from Codington County, South Dakota.
Yeah, navigating that multi-jurisdictional maze, especially now spanning 3 counties and still widening, without a clear, single lead agency right from the start, is just inherently difficult. Each county might have its own protocols, its own resources, its own main focus area. That can create huge inefficiencies if it's not perfectly coordinated. Yellow Medicine County joining just added another layer of complexity. And then you have Sheriff Dahl's red light theory. It's actually a fascinating example of how the human brain, especially under pressure in these high-stakes situations, just desperately tries to create order out of chaos, right? When you have basically zero information, like the sheriffs did, there's this almost irresistible urge to build a plausible story, even a hypothetical one, just to guide your next step.
Makes sense. Gives you something to go on.
Exactly. But that cognitive bias, it can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes it leads to breakthroughs, sure. Other times it can accidentally narrow your focus too much, send you down one path when maybe you should be looking broader. It really speaks to that human need to create a narrative, even a speculative one, when faced with just nothing. On a more practical note, those specialized resources, especially the bloodhounds, they offer something unique. Unlike us humans who rely on sight, bloodhounds follow scent trails, even faint ones, even old ones. They're a critical tool. But it's also important to remember scent degrades over time. It's affected by weather, rain, wind, heat. So their findings, while powerful, can sometimes be open to interpretation, as we're about to see.
And the bloodhounds definitely provided a lead. A compelling one, yeah, but also frustratingly inconclusive in the end. The specialized team from South Dakota, they picked up a scent trail. About 3 miles long, or 4.8 kilometers. This trail mostly followed field roads, heading west-northwest towards an abandoned farm. Then it kept going, persistently, along the Yellow Medicine River, right up to a specific spot where the trail just seemed to enter the stream. And this detail lined up almost perfectly, eerily, with what Brandon's dad remembered from that last phone call, Brandon mentioning fences and hearing water nearby. So with the scent trail leading directly to the river, the main theory quickly became that Brandon might have fallen in and drowned. Responding to this really compelling evidence, the state's Department of Natural Resources got involved. They deployed boats along the river doing extensive sweeps. They even installed gates upstream to try and control the water flow and help the search as the water levels went down. It was noted that the water in some parts of Lincoln County had been maybe 10 feet deep the morning he disappeared, though it had gone down a bit since then. Deputies walked the riverbanks for miles. They brought in horses, ATVs, covering the surrounding areas, just looking for any other sign. However, and this is a key point, despite this incredibly compelling scent trail, the one that directly connected to Brandon's last known words, Sheriff Dahl specifically ruled out doing a more organized, extensive ground search away from the river. The focus had really narrowed right down to the water.
And this is exactly where the evidence becomes both incredibly compelling and, at the same time, deeply inconclusive. You can't overstate the power of a scent trail. It's biological evidence of movement. It led them, step by step, connecting directly to Brandon's own description. It built a really strong narrative. So naturally, the immediate assumption was drowning. That prompted bringing in the water search units, messing with river levels, all that. But as you pointed out, the trail ending at the water and then all the subsequent water searches, they didn't find a body. That left the main theory totally unconfirmed, a huge gaping hole in the investigation, which raises that important question that haunts so many of these cases. Why was a more extensive ground search ruled out? Especially given that compelling trail and the family saying Brandon sounded lucid.
Right. If he was lucid, why wouldn't he try to get out or call again?
Exactly. Was it just understandable resource limits in such a huge rural area? Or maybe a really strong belief that the river was the most likely answer, which narrowed the focus too early? That decision point is critical because it shapes the whole rest of the investigation. Circumstantial evidence, like the river theory here, it can definitely guide you. But without definitive proof, sometimes it can mislead you or make you focus too narrowly. Relying so heavily on the scent trail, powerful as it was, might have unintentionally limited looking at other possibilities if the ground search wasn't equally thorough. Maybe leaving land-based clues undiscovered. It's that constant struggle in investigations, isn't it? Balancing the most plausible lead with keeping an open mind for all possibilities.
And so, as days turned into weeks, that initial search intensity, it eventually started to fade. Most of the official large-scale efforts were gradually wound down. It's unfortunately a pretty common path for missing adult cases when there aren't immediate concrete clues. But here's a detail that's just incredibly poignant. It really speaks to the dedication of some individuals and the relentless, almost heartbreaking hope of a family. Sheriff Fezecki from Lincoln County, the county where Brandon's car was found, he kept walking 2 miles of that Yellow Medicine River area every single day for 30 days after the main search was officially called off. I mean, that's a personal commitment way beyond typical police duty. And the Swansons themselves, Brandon's parents, they started this deeply moving ritual, one that actually continues to this very day. They leave their porch light on all night, every single night, a constant, silent symbol of their hope that Brandon will eventually come home or be found. That light is still on, a beacon of just enduring love and this unwavering vigil. Official searches, though scaled back, they did pick up again later that fall, after the fields that had been planted right after he disappeared were harvested, making them easier to search. During these renewed efforts, search dogs kept following scents of human remains, unfortunately into an area northwest of Porter that hadn't been searched before. It offered maybe a glimmer of a new direction. This cycle, searching again, it continued through 2011, usually after the snow melted but before planting season started again, when visibility was best. By that time, an absolutely astounding 122 square miles, that's 320 square kilometers, roughly the size of Philadelphia, had been meticulously searched. In 2010, recognizing how complex and cold the case had become, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the BCA, took over as the lead agency. They set up a dedicated tip line. By 2015, they'd gotten 90 leads that way, each one a potential threader, right? By then, the main area of interest had kind of subtly shifted towards Mud Creek, which is a tributary of the Yellow Medicine north and northwest of Porter, mostly based on those continued scent dog indications.
What's truly striking here is just the sheer resilience of the human spirit when you're facing such prolonged uncertainty. You see it in the incredible dedication of people like Sheriff Fezecki, taking that personal stake, going way beyond the call of duty. And then the unwavering, almost symbolic hope of the Swanson family with that porch light. It stands in such stark contrast to the natural winding down of official large-scale efforts, which happens often due to limited resources or just the decreasing odds of finding new evidence after time passes. And the sheer scale of the search, 122 square miles, it just underscores how incredibly difficult it is to find someone in a vast natural landscape, especially when you have no immediate concrete clues about where they went. Imagine the physical toll, the emotional toll on everyone involved, day after day, hope, exhaustion. And we also see the evolution of how cold cases are investigated, right? Shifting the lead agency to the state-level BCA, that signals a move towards a more centralized, specialized approach. Recognizing the complexity, the long-term nature of it, setting up a tip line, that's standard for cold cases. You're relying on public memory, or maybe someone coming forward with new information years later. And the reevaluation of search areas, shifting towards Mud Creek based on those later scent trails, that shows how new info, or the persistence of certain types of evidence, can make investigators revisit and redefine their focus over time, even years later. It's really a testament to the fact that these cases are never truly closed until there's an answer, and that new perspectives or new technologies maybe can reignite the efforts.
So after all those years of searching, all that time passed, countless efforts, the mystery of Brandon's disappearance still generates these different theories, and none of them have ever been definitively proven. First, let's go back to the drowning theory. Okay, the scent trail led to the Yellow Medicine River, and Brandon did mention hearing water. But his mother, Annette Swanson, has consistently said she strongly believes Brandon did not drown there. She points to a really crucial detail. The bloodhound, after following the scent to the water's edge, apparently continued across to the other side of the river, and then followed along that riverbank to another gravel road. From there, it kept going north towards the Yellow Medicine County line before the scent finally gave out. As Annette powerfully told CNN, there really is nothing to indicate that he's in the river. And Brian Swanson also kept emphasizing how lucid and coherent Brandon sounded on those last calls, which seems to contradict the idea of him suddenly becoming disoriented and drowning without being able to call out or get to safety. If he was clear-headed, why would he suddenly, uncharacteristically, just walk into dangerous water? Okay, then there's the theory of intentional disappearance. Now, this is always a possibility with any missing adult, right? That they chose to vanish for their own reasons. But Brandon's parents strongly believe he would not have done this. They describe a son who was looking forward to coming home, had no known major problems that would make him flee, zero indication he planned to disappear. His car was stuck. He was calling for help, not trying to stage an escape. This theory just doesn't fit his known character or what he was doing in those final moments. And finally, there's that unsettling, always lurking possibility of foul play. Sheriff Fizecki, even though there was no direct physical evidence at the car or along that initial scent trail, he stated he couldn't rule it out. He even speculated openly to the media, saying something like, someone could have been in the shadows and they got him that way, which suggests this hidden, unknown threat. Someone might have intercepted Brandon after he left his car and started walking in that vast, dark, rural setting. The idea of another person out there, unseen. It's a terrifying possibility that's never been dismissed.
The elusive nature of the truth in cases like Brandon's, it's just agonizing. Not just for the family, obviously, but for investigators too, who are striving for definitive answers. If we analyze the strengths and weaknesses of each theory, based only on the information we actually have, it's crucial for critical thinking. The drowning theory. Initially compelling, sure, because of the scent trail hitting the river and Brandon mentioning water, but it's significantly weakened by Annette's account of the bloodhound continuing its trail beyond the river. If that dog crossed, it strongly suggests Brandon did too, or at least didn't go into the water to drown right there. Couple that with Brian's firm belief in Brandon's lucidity. It makes the drowning scenario seem less probable as the whole explanation. Then, intentional disappearance. Like you said, always possible for an adult. But the parents' strong conviction against it is a powerful counterpoint. Families usually have the deepest insight into someone's character, their plans, their habits. While it's not forensic evidence, their dismissal of this theory feels very credible, especially given Brandon's last known actions calling for help, not trying to vanish. And then, foul play. The very nature of foul play is often that it leaves minimal evidence, maybe none, especially in a rural area with few witnesses where the environment itself can hide clues. Sheriff Fizecki not being able to rule it out, his speculation about someone in the shadows. That just highlights the nagging uncertainty. The complete absence of a body or any definitive evidence allows all these multiple conflicting theories to just persist side by side. It keeps the case open, the mystery alive. Which raises that important question. How do investigations even grapple with that kind of pervasive ambiguity, where even your strongest leads turn out inconclusive, leaving families stuck in this perpetual limbo? It forces this constant reevaluation of assumptions, staying open to all possibilities, no matter how unlikely, while dealing with the awful reality of no closure.
But this profound personal tragedy, this agonizing lack of answers, it ultimately became this incredibly powerful catalyst for systemic change, not just in Minnesota, but beyond. Annette Swanson, as you mentioned earlier, was just deeply affected by that initial dismissive response from the Lynn police that her son, an adult, had a right to be missing. Her conviction was just so powerful, so clear. I'm his mother, and I knew something was horribly wrong. That intense frustration, that feeling of being brushed off in her darkest hour, it galvanized Annette and Brian. They channeled their grief into action and started lobbying for major changes in state law. Their goal was ambitious, really transformative, to require police to start investigating a missing adult case as soon as it's reported, just like the immediate urgent protocols already in place for potentially abducted kids. Annette took this fight straight to the state legislature. She refused to let Brandon's disappearance just be in vain. She met with Marty Seifert, who was the minority leader of the state House of Representatives back then, and his district included Marshall, where they lived. Seifert recalled later in 2015 that Annette knew this law wouldn't help find Brandon directly. It was likely too late for his specific case, but she was absolutely unwavering in her belief that it could help others in the future. That foresight, that kind of incredible altruism while living through her own ongoing heartbreak and uncertainty, it's truly remarkable. She saw a flaw in the system and just committed herself to fixing it for every other family who might face that horror.
Yeah, what's really fascinating there is how that deeply personal experience, feeling this systemic inadequacy firsthand, can become this powerful engine driving legislative reform. Annette's conviction wasn't just, an emotional reaction. It was a clear-eyed identification of a critical gap in the law, a gap that had failed her family at a crucial moment. And the fundamental shift in philosophy they were pushing for was profound, moving away from that default assumption of chosen absence for adults and towards treating all missing persons with immediate urgency, regardless of age, especially if the circumstances suggest potential danger. Recognizing that those first hours are critical for any missing person, no matter their age. That was revolutionary for adult missing persons protocols at the time. And Annette Swanson's foresight, advocating for future families even while her own tragedy was this raw, open wound, it just shows incredible altruism and resilience, turning personal pain into public good. It really highlights a critical aspect of how social change happens. Often it takes that lived experience of injustice to truly galvanize people into action and bring about real legislative reform.
And so, that difficult legislative journey began. Marty Seifert courageously introduced a bill, calling it Brandon's Law. The core change, like you said, seems simple on paper, but it was monumental in its impact. It proposed amending the existing missing child program law to change just one powerful word. Child became person. That tiny word change meant that all those immediate, urgent response mechanisms already in place for children, things like immediate BALO alerts, sharing info between agencies quickly, deploying resources rapidly, would now automatically apply to all missing individuals. It wiped out that legal distinction that often left families waiting helplessly while precious hours just slipped away. Now, Seifert did recall there was considerable resistance at first, particularly from parts of the state's law enforcement community, as the bill made its way through committee. He told the local paper, the Marshall Independent, that part of it had to do with privacy, especially regarding cell phones. Remember, this was a time when cell phone tech was exploding, but the legal rules around how police could use it were still being figured out. There were serious talks about when can they ping you and when can't they. It raised genuine concerns about individual privacy versus the police's need to investigate, especially when no crime was immediately obvious. It was a complex debate. But despite these initial hurdles and that tricky legal landscape, Dennis Frederickson introduced a matching bill over in the state Senate. That ensured it moved through both chambers. The Swansons and their supporters, they worked tirelessly, testifying, sharing Brandon's story again and again, explaining why this change was so critically needed. And their efforts paid off. The bills passed both houses. It even passed unanimously in the lower chamber, which really says a lot about the broad consensus they eventually built, how people understood its importance once they grasped the human impact. The big moment came on May 13, 2009. Governor Tim Pawlenty signed Brandon's law into effect, and the Swansons, Brian and Annette, and their daughter Jamin were right there at the ceremony. A really powerful moment, marking how their personal tragedy was transformed into this lasting legacy for others across Minnesota.
Yeah, and connecting that back to the bigger picture, that resistance from law enforcement, especially around privacy and cell phones, it really highlights that constant tension we see in modern society, right? Balancing individual privacy rights against the state's duty to protect its citizens. Back in the early 2000s, the power of cell phone tracking was still pretty new territory, legally and ethically. Figuring out the clear boundaries for how and when police could access that data for missing persons cases particularly when there wasn't immediate proof of a crime. That was a genuine, complex legal and ethical debate. So the pushback wasn't necessarily about not wanting to find missing people. It was more about trying to define the limits of police power in this era of fast-changing technology. But the fact that the bill passed unanimously in the lower house, that's a really powerful sign. It suggests that once the human side of the problem was clearly articulated, thanks to families like the Swansons and the practical benefits of the changes were understood, they reach a broad agreement, overcoming those initial reservations and legal complexities. It broke through the institutional inertia. And the symbolic importance of the governor signing the law with the family right there. You can't overstate that. It turns a legislative act into a deeply human story. It acknowledges the family's pain and validates their relentless advocacy as being absolutely central to this vital policy change. It's like a public recognition. This law exists because of their fight. It's etched into the state's laws now.
And the impact of Brandon's law has been huge, really beneficial. It fundamentally changed how police respond to missing adult cases in Minnesota. The law now requires police, right in their preliminary investigation, to not only figure out if someone is missing, but also if they are potentially in dangerous circumstances. That's a critical shift. Moves away from assuming they just left and demands an immediate risk assessment. Police now must notify other nearby law enforcement agencies promptly. That directly tackles those multi-county coordination problems that plagued Brandon's initial search. Ensures immediate, streamlined info sharing. Crucially, Brandon's law clarified that the agency taking the very first report is automatically the lead agency for the investigation. A critical change to streamline things across jurisdictions, prevent that confusion of multiple departments working independently, and maybe most importantly, the law explicitly says police are no longer allowed to refuse taking a report based on several of those old frustrating excuses. Things like an initial belief there's no crime involved, how short the time interval is since the person was last seen, the possibility the person might have intentionally disappeared, or even if the person reporting them isn't directly related. So no more it's their right to be missing just hours after someone vanishes. Those barriers to immediate action, legislatively removed. This transformative law officially took effect at the beginning of July 2009, and its influence has spread beyond Minnesota. 4 other states have since passed similar laws, recognizing how vital these changes are. Marty Seifert, the representative who introduced the bill, he left the legislature in 2010, but he still keeps the pen Governor Polentani used to sign that bill into law. He considers it one of the most important bills I authored in my 14 years. It will save lives.
The so what of this systemic change is truly impactful. Every single provision in Brandon's law offers tangible benefits for future missing persons investigations. It removes critical barriers, streamlines those first crucial steps. By forcing police to determine if someone is in potentially dangerous circumstances, it demands a proactive shift in mindset. Assess risk now. Don't wait for proof of a crime. The mandatory notification of nearby agencies, the clear designation of a lead agency, that directly solves those multi-jurisdictional nightmares like the one in Brandon's initial search. Ensures cohesive, efficient efforts right from the start, when every minute counts. But yeah, the most significant barrier removed is that explicit ban on refusing a report based on those outdated assumptions. That's where the law directly answers Annette Swanson's harrowing experience. No longer can police dismiss a report because it's only been a few hours, or maybe they just left, or you're not immediate family. This empowers families, friends, anyone, to engage law enforcement immediately when they sense something is wrong. It ensures those critical early hours when leads are freshest, searches most effective, aren't wasted because of old bureaucratic rules or flawed philosophies. And a ripple effect. Other states adopting similar laws. It just demonstrates how widely recognized the importance of this is, and the enduring legacy of the Swanson family's incredible advocacy. It really raises that question, doesn't it? How can one family's story, born from such profound personal tragedy, actually spark such significant, widespread policy reform? How could it fundamentally change how an entire society responds to its most vulnerable? It just highlights the immense power of determined individuals to drive change that benefits countless others, turning terrible pain into this enduring protective force.
The disappearance of Brandon Swanson, it does remain one of those haunting mysteries, a profound void for his family, for a community still searching for answers. Those cornfields, those rivers in rural Minnesota, they still hold secrets. But out of that pain, a powerful legacy did emerge, one that speaks volumes about the incredible strength of the human spirit and that enduring belief in justice and safety for everyone.
Absolutely. The Swansons' journey took a personal tragedy and transformed it into this vital legal framework. It ensures that no other family seeking help for a missing adult loved one should ever have to hear those devastating words, "It's their right to be missing." It's truly a testament to the enduring power of hope and advocacy even when facing the complete unknown. And maybe something for you, the listener, to consider. In this age we live in, with instant information, constant connection, how do we as a society strike that really delicate balance between respecting personal privacy and the urgent, undeniable need to protect vulnerable people? Especially when that line between someone choosing to be absent and someone being forcibly disappeared is often so incredibly fine. And what responsibility do we truly have collectively when someone simply vanishes without a trace?